These little piggies may not make it to market. Pork producers in the US say higher tariffs on exports to China could stifle demand.
China is a particularly important market. Last year we sent $1.1 billion of pork to China. That made it the second largest export market by volume. So it's a disappointment. Hopefully the United States and China can resolve these trade disputes and we can return to more favorable access to what is a very important export market for us.
Frustration is also rising among soybean growers. They say the government's turning a blind eye to the sector. Farmers in China are among their biggest customers. A shortage of animal feed there could send food prices spiraling for Chinese consumers. Yet both governments are toughening their rhetoric and piling on barriers to trade. US President Donald Trump says his plan's working. He's asked his staff to find more Chinese imports to tax at higher rates, taking the affected trade volume to $100 billion. And Beijing is promising to follow suit.
The US is wrong in attempting to benefit from protectionism. Both China and the US are major countries in the world who should respect each other and treat each other as equals. The US has picked the wrong target in hitting China with trade sanctions.
The war of words is bad news for these farmers. And as tariffs drive up prices, the US-China trade war could claim more casualties. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Rajiv Biswas is the chief economist at the financial services company IHS Markit Asia Pacific. He says it's not only the US and China that are involved, other Asian markets are nervous too.
They're very worried that although the tariffs are not being applied to them directly, they will suffer because they're part of the supply chain to China for a lot of these manufacturers in areas such as electronics, electrical products, which are among the areas where the US has put on additional tariffs. So there's collateral damage that will apply to many countries in the Asia-Pacific region, particularly those heavily involved in the manufacturing supply chain for Chinese end products that are later exported to the US. President Trump and President Xi are engaged in a high-stakes game of poker on this trade dispute. And basically, the purpose of the US tariffs is to try to bring China to the negotiating table at the World Trade Organization to try to find what the US considers to be a fair agreement on technology transfer terms, intellectual property rights. So that is the purpose of the US Section 301 tariffs. So in this game of tit for tat, as each side escalates, China's going to run out of US products to put tariffs on a lot faster than the US. So I think that's what the US is calculating on right now.
So that's the view from Asia, but let's bring it back to the US now. And for that, let's go to Jeffrey Tucker. He is the editorial director of the American Institute for Economic Research, and he's joining us today from Detroit. Jeffrey, always great to have you on Money Talks. Now, you and I normally talk about Bitcoin on this show, but let's talk about US and China trade. Now, in your blog post from a couple of days ago titled "No One Wins a Trade War," you make a very interesting connection between why Trump is targeting China and Amazon. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, yeah, there is a relationship here. Trump actually has a theory. People don't believe this. They think that he's engaged in some sort of tactic to open up markets. I don't believe that. I think he has macroeconomic ambitions. He wants to bring production back domestically and basically turn back the clock. He's a real estate investor. He's dedicated to brick and mortar. That's what he cares about more than anything else. He believes that national productivity is connected with pouring cement and using steel and keeping everything at home. He made this very clear in 2015. People tried not to listen, tried not to hear, but he's actually been very consistent, consistently terrifying, actually. And this is my concern, that this isn't really a negotiating tactic. I have friends who work for him in an economics role with the administration. They're always calling me saying, listen, you need to just calm down. You know, this is just a tactic. We're opening up markets. But, you know, every time they say that, the very next day, Trump contradicts them with ever more rhetoric, ever more escalation. I think Trump wants a trade war, and I think the end game for him is not something that's consistent with the way we do business in the 21st century.
Nonetheless, though, China is also playing a delicate dance with Trump on this. What is China's end goal in this, do you think?
Well, it seems to me that what's happening here is a little bit of a challenge to national pride on both fronts. I mean, China can't very well stand by and let something like Donald Trump seem to get the best of them, and so this is a tit for tat. I mean, even in the segment you just played, you saw a spokesman for China saying they don't want this. They want friendly relationships. They don't want a trade war. But what are you going to do? I mean, there is a national pride angle here, but Chinese consumers are going to suffer, and American consumers and producers are going to suffer. Truly, as I said in my article, nobody can possibly win from this trade war, except, I guess you could say, governments. But even that, it's, you know, you can look and see how the financial markets have responded since the beginning of this year, since Trump has started ramping up this protectionist, mercantilist rhetoric, and the markets don't like it. And I think it's really interesting because Donald Trump is sensitive to market signals, but on this one issue, it's almost like he adopts a kind of a nihilism. You know, it's like, I don't care what the financial markets say. I'm gonna push ahead regardless.
Right, Jeffrey, the next big date to look out for is in just over a month's time, when the US Trade Representative decides on whether to actually act on the president's recommendations to implement these tariffs. Which way do you think the USTR is going to go on this?
I'm sorry to say that I think they're going to go with Trump. I mean, Trump has been very clear about his agenda here since the very beginning. By the way, nor do I believe this is about intellectual property. You notice that he has something like 9 different excuses. It's the trade deficit, you know, it's too high tariffs in China, it's that China's subsidizing production, it's too low wages in China, and so on and so on and so on. There's always a reason for him to protect and to guard national productivity. And this is his core belief. And it's at the core of what the Trump administration came to power to do. I'm sorry to reveal this to you. In 2017, it was easy to forget this, but now this is a different year, different times, and Trump's coming onto his own. And it's pretty scary. And nor will he tolerate anybody in the executive branch to dispute him.
Fascinating insights, as always. Jeffrey Tucker, thank you very much indeed.